Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Suburban Pathfinder. If you're one of my long-standing subscribers who came on board when we were mostly doing watch and knife videos, and you've been wondering why we've been doing so much motorcycle content, it's because my bike is where my head is at the moment. But do take heart. There will be that same old content coming eventually. I don't know when I'm going to be buying a new watch. I don't have any immediate plans to do so, but you never know. I'm always in the market for a new knife. If you're not a regular subscriber, you're probably watching this video because you're contemplating the purchase of a SOG Flare. This is a utilitarian folding knife from SOG. As you've just seen, it's assisted opening, flick of the thumb, and out the blade goes. It's pretty much a very common design at this point for like a basic utility or work knife. This was very much for me an impulse purchase. It was on the clearance rack at one of the big box stores, and I just grabbed it on a whim to see what it looked like. And I think we should go over to the bench top and take a look at this knife because I have some very distinct feelings about this knife. I've seen some glowing reviews and I've seen some not so good reviews, and I'm somewhere in the middle. So let's go take a look at it. Okay, everyone. So here is the SOG Flare. I'd like to start off by apologizing for the audio in this episode. I don't have my microphone with me. Well, actually, I do have my microphone with me, but I don't have my Zoom H1n audio recorder with me. So we're just relying on the internal audio from my phone. Second of all, if I sound a bit congested, that's because it's January in Pennsylvania. And of course I have a cold. I am congested. And I'm going to try to keep this brief because I literally took this thing out of the packaging, I don't know, an hour or two ago. And I haven't really had a chance to evaluate it yet, but I do have some definite feelings about the knife. First of all, a little bit about SOG. I'm not going to get deep into their history, but they've been producing knives for years. They started off producing most of their models of knives in Japan, and there was this push in the late 1990s when labor rates and materials rates and everything went way up in Japan, and it became much more expensive to manufacture stuff in Japan. SOG did continue to make knives in Japan, but they also shifted a lot of their production to the United States. And this was, good PR, nice patriotic move. But SOG knives, in my early experience, were extremely high quality. I've had some Japanese-made ones. This is one that was made in the U.S. Actually, this is one of the last ones when SOG was shifting production overseas again. This was one of the last knives I bought that was made in the U.S. And you can see it's very, very high quality. This model never really took off. This is the SOG Seal Revolver. It was kind of a mashup between the SOG Seal Pup and a saw. And maybe I'll do a whole video on that at some point in time. But as you can see, the grind on the blade, absolutely impeccable. The finish, the satin finish on the blade is absolutely impeccable. The construction of the knife is just really, really good. We've got a Kydex, an actual Kydex sheath, which was probably hand-formed. We've got fiber-reinforced rubber retention strap, military-type attachments to go onto a pistol belt or, I guess, Molly gear. These are just really good quality knives. Then, as happens, this idea that we were going to make all of our knives in the United States kind of went by the wayside because making stuff in America turned out to not be particularly cost-effective. And SOG ended up shifting production mostly to Taiwan, and the knives that are made in Taichung, Taiwan are actually pretty decent. They're pretty equivalent, I would say, to the early knives that were made in Japan. This one, however, is made in the People's Republic of China. Now, when SOG originally started producing knives in China, they did so under their Fusion brand. I think they didn't really want to taint the SOG name while they were experimenting with making knives in China. Spyderco did a very similar thing with their bird knives. This is the Rescue 2. Now, Spyderco is producing Spyderco branded knives in China, but when they first started making knives in China, or having knives made in China, as you can see right there, and it is made from Alphabet Steel 8CR13 MOV, they went with the bird name. And then I think the bird knives are still in production, and they're really quite good because they're made under supervision from China. SOG went with their Fusion line, as I said, and the SOG Fusion knives had, in addition to the copious SOG branding all over the place, also had the Fusion branding. But at some point in time, SOG started making knives in China and selling them in standard SOG packaging. And I have resisted purchasing one of these knives for a long time, but this was definitely an impulse buy. I bought it on clearance for like $17, I think. I think it started off at $29 or something like that. And it's not a surprise. I knew that it was made in China. I always check the country of origin when I'm purchasing something like this, but I thought it would be cheap enough for me to check out. And I have to say, it's not terribly impressive. A couple of people, a couple of other channels, Gideon's Tactical was talking very highly of this knife. I think as a basic utility knife, it's probably not too bad. We've got this clip point blade. Of course, the swedge is not sharpened. I do like the blade design. The grind is okay. You can tell that in China they're still doing hand grinding because it's not very precise. You're not going to be able to tell very well, but the grind is a bit asymmetrical, which results, I'm pretty sure that this, kind of mediocre blade centering doesn't have to do with the construction of the knife. It has to do with the grind of the blade. You can tell here some inconsistencies. This surface, the primary grind, is pretty nice and even, but then there's this very shallow divot in the main grind, which, clearly was somebody hitting the grinder by accident after the main grind was finished. And it doesn't affect the performance of the knife, but it doesn't look, it just doesn't look professional. I mean, look at that. The edge is actually hair-popping sharp, as one would expect from SOG. Very, very sharp, but initial sharpness doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, especially with a rather utilitarian blade steel. This is 8CR13 MOV, as is that in this bird knife. But with the bird knife, I know that it's heat treated properly. And I've used bird knives hard. I have no idea what kind of heat treatment SOG is doing on their knives. I imagine it's probably pretty good, but we're going to find out. I bought this knife. I'm going to halt my EDC rotation, particularly at my maintenance job, for a few weeks and carry this knife just to see how the blade holds up and how the heat treatment is on it. There are a few things I don't really care for about this knife. SOG touts it as being very lightweight, and it is very lightweight. But I don't really think that's sort of the result of some kind of superior design. It's mostly a result of the fact that there are no liners. We've got a glass reinforced nylon, two halves. It's closed on the back, so the two halves of the frame, the handle scales, if you will, have nothing supporting them inside. There's no liner whatsoever. as you can see with, for instance, this bird knife. I hate to keep going back to that. That has a full steel liner in it, which adds a little bit of weight, but it also adds a great deal of stiffness and strength to the design. I'm not so sure about the SOG Flare. This uses SOG's arc lock, which works fairly well. It seems to be a fairly strong locking system, and it's easy to manipulate. I don't get the impression that this would close on your hand very easily. There's a little bit of lock rock and a little bit of side-to-side play. Those really don't bother me too much, especially in an assisted opening knife. It needs to be a little bit loose to deploy reliably. And if I can say one really good thing about the SOG Flare is that it deploys very reliably. It's powered pretty much most of the opening stroke. It's powered open, and it snaps open with some authority. This features SOG's safety. I forget what they call that exactly. It doesn't work when the blade is open. It's meant to lock the knife shut, and it does do that very effectively. The problem is there's no real detent or anything on this safety, and it's not particularly stiff. It just kind of flops back and forth, which, honestly, if I could take the knife apart, I would take this safety out, I think, and throw it in the trash. But I can't take the knife apart, and that's the other big problem with this thing. Like I said, you don't want the blade to be super tight. This type of pivot pin is meant to be adjustable. We've got a 2mm Allen drive screw here, 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters, all Allen screws. There's no corresponding Allen socket on the other side of the pivot pin assembly. And this is clearly put together with Loctite or something. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if there was another Allen socket over here, or if this thing had steel liners. But the way these things are designed, when you see one that has a receptacle here and none over here, is that the profile of your pivot pin, please forgive my rather rudimentary art here, but the cross-section of your pivot pin will be round with one flat side, and the hole that goes through the handle scales and the liners will also be shaped the same way. And this is what prevents the pin from rotating when you try to open up this, when you try to loosen and take out this screw. But there's nothing here but plastic. Therefore, and it is Loctited quite firmly. So when I put a 2mm Allen wrench in here and started trying to unscrew this, the sort of flat-sided pivot pin simply rounded out the hole in the plastic, and I made absolutely no progress whatsoever. So this thing is pretty much permanently assembled. I'm sure I could get this apart if I really wanted to chew up this head over here, but I really don't care that much. So all in all, I'd say it's pretty unimpressive. The deep carry pocket clip is very, very stiff and very, very deep. I mean, these things arc way up above the bottom of the grip frame here. So this thing will sit pretty deep in your pocket, and it is not likely to fall out of your pocket. This clip is pretty strong. I could do without the skeletonized SOG logo, but that doesn't bother me as much as it bothers some people. So all in all, I would say, if you can find, there it goes. If you can find it on clearance and you're looking for a cheap beater knife and it's not more than maybe $17, $18, I would say you could probably do a bunch worse. I'm hoping that because it is SOG, even though it's made in China out of alphabet steel, that it will be properly heat treated and I'll get some good use out of it. But we won't know until I have tried. So I guess that's all I have to say about the SOG Flare. Not the most impressive sort of first impression, but maybe it'll wow me in its performance. We'll see over the coming weeks. let's go wrap this up. So I don't know that this video has been very helpful. To sum it all up, I really don't know what to make of the SOG Flare. Again, it's very sharp. If the heat treatment turns out to be okay, this 8CR13 MOV can be a decent knife steel. Again, it's very similar to either AUS 8 or AUS 6. I don't exactly remember. We'll see how the construction holds up, and we'll see just how annoying this sort of floppy safety gets. I've already had a couple of times when I tried to deploy the knife and it just wouldn't go because I had inadvertently deployed the safety. So it could be a good knife. It could be a total piece of junk. But so far I don't see any reason why it couldn't, be a decent work knife. I'm a maintenance man. I'm going to put it in my pocket for a couple of weeks. I'll halt the other things in my daily EDC rotation. I guess I would say if you're like I was, standing in front of a clearance rack and you see this thing for $15, or I think I paid $17 for it, yeah, go ahead and go for it if it's something that you want. If you see it marked at full price, I think the full price was $29 or something. And I think originally on SOG's website, it was marked at like $37. I would return this knife if I had paid full price for it. But for $15-17, it might turn out to be a pretty decent little work knife. We will find out. And, if the edge doesn't hold up, or if I'm constantly having to resharpen it, if it breaks, once again, we don't have any steel liners inside here, which makes for a very light knife, but I don't know how it speaks to the long-term durability of the knife. If it breaks, I'll certainly let you know about that. And when I do, I hope to catch each of you then. Later, guys.